You were never meant to see this. Whatever you thought you knew about exploration, about bravery, about the vastness of space, it was all a lie, or at least an incomplete truth. Right now, as you sit there reading these words, you're crossing a line that countless others before you ignored or were warned never to cross. But you, somehow, by fate or accident, have opened a door that should have remained sealed, hidden behind layers of silence and carefully constructed disbelief. Look closely. You might not notice it at first. Nothing is shouting danger here, just a quiet, cold hum in the background of your mind, the kind of whisper you only catch when you stop trying to listen. The unsettling question that no one ever dared to ask. What if surviving on Titan isn't just impossible, but that the planet itself is a slow, deliberate killer? Titan, Saturn's largest moon, once a beacon of hope in humanity's endless hunger for new frontiers, is not a place of triumph. It is a crucible of fading life, a ghostly echo of dreams gone wrong. The scientists, the engineers, the explorers, they never fully admitted this, not out loud. But the truth drips from their reports like poison, staining every success with the bitter taste of failure, and worse, it never lets go. I'm not here as your narrator, but as your witness. I saw it, the impossible unraveling of human will on that frozen moon, and I'm the only one who knows what really happened. What's worse, I'm the only one who can still tell you. You think you understand isolation? You think you know what it means to be cut off, to fight against a silent enemy? Then imagine being trapped in a world where the atmosphere itself conspires to erode your mind, where the cold seeps deeper than your skin, and where every breath draws you closer to a slow, inevitable unraveling of your very being. The air is heavier than you can comprehend, thick with invisible threats that corrupt your senses and twist your thoughts. The horizon is a desolate orange haze, but it's not the dust or the chemicals that haunt you. It's the creeping awareness that Titan is not just a place you live on. It's a place that lives in you, and it's slowly, inexorably ending. You, the last transmission I intercepted, a whisper captured in static, was not from a scientist or a mission commander. It was from one of the colonists, someone who had spent months alone in the dark, surrounded by silence so complete it screamed. The words were faint, barely audible over the interference, but what was said before the transmission abruptly cut out changed everything. They're here, listening. No one else heard it, no one else understood, but I did. And in that moment, something inside me broke, because I realized that survival wasn't just a question of technology or courage, it was a question of sanity. And sanity on Titan is a fragile, flickering candle in a hurricane. There was one event, one inexplicable, haunting moment that shattered the illusion of safety. A young engineer, someone who had been meticulous and calm under pressure, vanished from the habitat module. No alarms, no signs of forced entry. 1 second, he was standing in the lab whispering to himself a name that no one else had ever heard. Before, a name that didn't exist on any records or manifests. Then, just like that, he was gone, like a ghost swallowed by the moon itself. No footprints, no evidence, just a chilling silence that filled the room like a shadow. What followed was a slow unraveling. A baby born on Titan, the first of its kind, uttered the same name, the one whispered before the engineer disappeared, long before anyone taught it to speak. The voice that came through the comm system at night wasn't from any living person. It was the voice of a long-dead ancestor, carried across space and time in a way no science could explain. I won't lie to you. This story is not a tale of triumph or adventure. It is a story about what happens when hope dies quietly, when isolation twists into paranoia, and when the very essence of a place can break you down, piece by piece, until you're no longer sure if what you're experiencing is real, or just the echo of your own fading mind. If you're still reading, you've already crossed the threshold. And what comes next isn't just a story, it's a warning. Because surviving on Titan, it's not about breathing or building shelters. It's about fighting the slow creeping end that no one saw coming, and no one knew how to stop. But this isn't just about Titan, is it? It's about us, about how we face the unknown and what happens when the unknown stares back. You think, you're alone now? You're not. Because whatever happened there is beginning here. The habitat module was supposed to be a sanctuary, a fortress against the merciless alien cold and the crushing atmosphere of Titan's thick skies. Instead, it became a tomb of creeping dread, a place where the thin line between reality and madness was worn away by months of relentless pressure, both environmental and psychological. Marcus had always been a man of science, precise, unshakable, a voice of reason in the chaos of space. He was the one everyone trusted to keep the colony grounded. But on that final night, something inside Marcus cracked. It started with a name. A single word spoken in a breath so soft that even the most sensitive microphones barely caught it. Elysia. No one recognized it. It wasn't in the mission logs, the personnel files, or any of the ancestral records the colonists carried with them for comfort. Yet Marcus said it over and over, eyes wide but unfocused, like he was speaking to someone only he could see. Elysia. They're here. Listening, he murmured, voice trembling. When the others tried to approach to ask, he pulled back, panic flooding his features. Then the lights flickered, a low hum filled the air vents, and in the blink of an eye, he was gone. No emergency protocols were triggered. The security cameras showed nothing but empty space where Marcus had stood seconds before. The air smelled faintly of burnt ozone, but no one could explain how he disappeared without a trace. The colony fell into a silence so thick it was suffocating. People whispered about hallucinations, about Titan's atmosphere playing tricks on their minds. But deep down, everyone felt it. The shadow creeping behind their eyes, the unseen presence waiting in the cold. The baby's first words came weeks later, piercing the fragile calm. Elysia. The name no one spoke, repeated with eerie clarity from a voice too innocent to understand the terror it carried. And then the voices on the comms, ancient, fractured, and impossibly real, whispered secrets that no living person should know. Titan was not just a moon. It was a mirror, reflecting back the deepest fears and memories buried in the soul. It was alive in ways humanity couldn't comprehend, and it was hungry. You might think this is science fiction. You might think the mind is playing tricks. But, I promise you, there's a truth buried in this silence, and if you listen closely enough, if you're brave enough to hear it, you'll understand that survival on Titan is not just impossible, it is the slowest, most insidious end imaginable. So ask yourself, are you ready to see what no one else has dared to reveal? Because the moment you do, everything changes. The screen flickers. The image distorts for a moment, and then, just before it cuts to black, the faintest whisper echoes. A name lingering in the air, Elysia. The whisper, Elysia, lingered like a ghost's breath on the edge of your hearing, just as the screen shattered into darkness. But what came next wasn't what you expected. The image didn't cut clean. It stumbled, wavered, and then fractured into static, fractals of noise creeping like a slow rot over your senses. You blinked, unsure if the crackling was in the signal, or inside your own head. Was that really the name you heard? Or was it just your mind filling the silence with something familiar, something aching to be named? The question itself felt like a trap, because once you start doubting what you know, every certainty unravels. The floor beneath your feet becomes less solid. The line between what's real and what's fabricated starts to blur, and suddenly, you're not sure if you're witnessing a true unsolved mystery or the quiet collapse of a fractured mind. In the aftermath of Marcus's disappearance, the colony's logs, what few of them remained uncorrupted, offered nothing but contradictions. Official transcripts recorded Marcus's last moments as normal, mundane even. His calm, professional tone in the last transmission didn't match the frantic whispers you just heard. One file showed him checking equipment. Another suggested he never left the lab. An old voice recording surfaced, distorted, filled with static but unmistakably Marcus's voice, repeating, "All is well, and over like a mantra or a desperate prayer to silence the creeping chaos." But who was lying? The data, the files, even your own senses? Or was it something deeper? Something Titan was doing, twisting perception, warping memory until nothing felt trustworthy anymore. That's when she appeared. Her name was Lila, a systems analyst who arrived months after Marcus vanished. She claimed to be searching for answers, but every word she spoke was coded in uncertainty, every glance shadowed by a history she refused to share. Lila was the kind of person who made you question your own sanity just by being near, smiling when it didn't quite reach her eyes, nodding when you thought she hadn't heard, disappearing and reappearing at impossible times. "You shouldn't be here," she told me once, voice barely a whisper, as if the walls themselves had ears. "There are things they don't want you to remember, things buried deeper than the archives." Her gaze was sharp, yet haunted, like she was chasing ghosts only she could see. Her presence twisted the fragile threads of reality even further. She would play back recordings she insisted were misfiled, clips where voices, some mine, some not, spoke truths that contradicted everything I'd witnessed. Sometimes, when I wasn't looking, I found strange audio glitches embedded in the comm channels, fragments of conversations I didn't recall having, names I'd never heard before whispered with cold familiarity. Was it sabotage? Or was Titan's atmosphere, its unseen poison, corroding the mind's fragile barrier between sanity and something else? Memories slipped away like water through trembling fingers. I'd recall walking down the corridors of the habitat only to find them empty moments later, or recognize faces that vanished the instant I tried to focus on them. The baby's name, the whisper of Elysia, pulsed like a heartbeat beneath it all, a question I couldn't shake but dared not answer. Lila said she felt it too. "It's not just the cold," she said, staring out at the orange haze that swallowed Titan's horizon. "It's like the place feeds on the silence, on the secrets we try to bury. We're ghosts here, shadows waiting to be forgotten. But can you trust her? When the night falls and the hum of the habitat shifts into something darker, when the shadows flicker just beyond the corner of your eye, the only certainty is that nothing is as it seems. What they don't want you to remember is tangled in every fragment of data, every distorted voice, every disappearing friend. The truth is buried, but the silence screams. And if you listen close enough, the name Elysia still echoes, soft, relentless, and unbearably close. So keep watching, keep questioning, because this isn't just a story. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, and every answer you find will only deepen the mystery. The slow unraveling has begun, and it's already inside. What happens next, that depends on who's telling the story and which part of your mind you trust. Because out here on Titan, reality doesn't just bend, it breaks. And survival? Maybe it's never been about the body at all. The hum of the habitat felt different that day, quieter but more urgent, like the silence just before a confession. For the first time in weeks, the tangled web of data, whispers, and fractured memories started to unravel. I had the feeling deep in my chest, the one you get when you're staring at the missing piece of a puzzle, the moment before revelation. It was subtle, a series of encrypted files buried deep in the colony's archives, overlooked or maybe deliberately hidden. They were labeled with a code no one else seemed to acknowledge, Project Mnemosyne. The name alone was enough to send a shiver down my spine. Mnemosyne, the ancient goddess of memory. And what could be more fitting for a place that seemed to erase who you were, bite by slow, silent bite? I worked through the night, peeling back layers of scrambled code, fragmented voice logs, and corrupted video feeds. Each file revealed something new, something that made the entire nightmare begin to make sense. There was a pattern, a deliberate, systematic manipulation of the colonists' memories. It was no accident that Marcus vanished, no coincidence that Lila appeared when she did. The files hinted at experiments not just on the environment or survival equipment, but on the mind itself. They had been monitoring every thought, every fear, twisting memories to keep everyone compliant, obedient, and above all, silent. The truth was out there, written between lines of corrupted data and half-remembered dreams. And then, buried deep in the last transmission Marcus ever sent, a name surfaced: Elysia. Not just a name, but a trigger, a key to unlock the lies. The files suggested Elysia wasn't a person, not really. It was a code word for the system controlling the psychological manipulations, a dark network designed to watch, to infiltrate, and to erase. Suddenly, the whispers, the vanishing, the impossible voices weren't paranormal. They were engineered, a nightmare spawned in the depths of cold ambition and fear. For a fleeting moment, relief swept over me like a balm. The mystery wasn't some cosmic horror or inexplicable ghost story. It was human-made, concrete, something that could be fought, exposed, stopped. I thought I'd finally found the hidden truth, the breakthrough that would end the paranoia and the terror. The pieces aligned, the shadows recoiled, and the silence seemed ready to break. But then it hit me. Right when I thought the nightmare was ending, a glitch in the files showed a detail I couldn't ignore. It was an old recording, distorted, and grainy but unmistakable. A young woman's voice, trembling, recounting a memory that mirrored everything happening now, down to the smallest whisper of Elysia. Except this wasn't a future nightmare. It was a past one. Decades ago, in a facility on Earth, a similar psychological experiment went wrong. The memory was a confession from a survivor who vanished without a trace, describing how the mind was slowly unraveling under the weight of invisible watchers. The silence, the lost identities, the vanished colleagues. All of it repeated, a loop that no one had broken. The horror wasn't just here on Titan. It was everywhere. It was always watching, waiting, feeding on the spaces between memory and reality. The slow drip of madness wasn't a byproduct, it was the point. And if the colony's data was right, if Elysia was the system meant to protect them, then the system had failed long ago. Or maybe it was never meant to succeed. The line between mind and machine, memory and manipulation, blurred into a haze of distrust so thick you could suffocate in it. I looked over at Lila, who had been silent, eyes distant but sharper now, like she was seeing the same truth. But what frightened me most wasn't what she knew. It was what she didn't say. Because in that silence I heard the echo of a deeper threat, something ancient and unseen, not confined to code or hardware, but lurking in the atmosphere of the habitat itself, in the flickering lights and the cold hum of the air recyclers. It was watching, waiting, knowing. I couldn't name it, but I felt it in my bones, the weight of an invisible predator stalking the fragile mind. And then came the twist, a final piece of data hidden beneath layers of code, a video clip with no explanation or timestamp. The screen flickered to life, showing my own face, older, worn, eyes hollow, speaking words I didn't remember saying. "You're not crazy," the older me whispered, voice cracked with exhaustion. "They lied to you, you have to remember, before it's too late." The footage ended abruptly, replaced by static. Suddenly everything shifted. Every word, every memory, every suspicion was thrown into question. Had I been the watcher or the watched all along? Was this story a confession, a warning, or a trap? The line between victim and perpetrator blurred into a knot too tangled to unravel. The mystery wasn't just uncovered, it was rewritten. The truth I thought I held slipped through my fingers like smoke. You have to watch again. Every detail, every shadow, every hesitation matters. Because this isn't just a story you witness. It's one you live, piece by fragile piece. And the real horror? It's that the truth is still out there, waiting for you to find it. But this time you're not alone, or are you? If you think this has been your story alone, you were wrong all along. Because as I peeled back the fragile layers of my own unraveling, signs emerged. Small, nearly imperceptible but impossible to ignore. That I was not isolated in this descent. Somewhere beyond the flickering monitors and the silent corridors of Titan's colony, others were watching. Others who shared the same fractured memories. The same whispers of Elysia threading through their consciousness like a dark mantra no one dared speak aloud. They had been silent witnesses, bound not by place, but by something far more invasive. A shared fracture in reality itself, like cracks in glass refracting into endless fragments of paranoia and fear. It started with cryptic messages, sudden glimmers of text appearing on old screens that should have been dead, symbols carved into the rusted panels of forgotten equipment, sigils that made no sense to anyone but you, and maybe those few like you. Dreams, too, began to bleed into waking hours, threads weaving a tapestry of shared vision that no one could deny. Images of cold orange skies bleeding into darkness, of a shadow slipping just beyond reach, of a name whispered in a language that felt both foreign and hauntingly familiar. It was as if this hidden network of minds, scattered across time and space, had begun to communicate without words, without voices. A conspiracy stitched together not with government memos or leaked files, but with psychic threads and electric pulses that danced just beyond comprehension. Found footage from 20 years ago surfaced, grainy, unsettling, showing faces that resembled me and the others caught in the same loop of silence and erasure. What the government never released, what the archives denied, suddenly glimmered like a secret code waiting to be cracked. And as these connections deepened, so did the dread, thickening the air like a storm about to break. The questions that haunted us were no longer just about survival on Titan, or the shadowy experiments meant to break the mind, but about the very nature of identity and control. Who were we if our memories were not ours? How could we trust the self when the self itself was a battleground, erased, rewritten, repurposed by forces that thrived in the shadows between truth and illusion? Amid this swirling tempest of doubt, a new perspective emerged, an observer unlike any other, speaking from the margins of the known, the liminal spaces where reality seemed to thin. Their voice was calm but urgent, threading through the chaos, like a lifeline. They claimed to have watched us all along, to have glimpsed the machinery beneath the surface that pulled the strings. Not a participant, not a victim, but a witness, and perhaps the only one telling the unvarnished truth. Their messages, scattered across hidden channels and encrypted files, challenged everything, every memory we trusted, every shadow we chased, every fear we buried deep. The boundaries between self and other, watcher and watched, friend and foe began to dissolve into a swirling void of uncertainty. What was real? What was implanted? What part of us belonged to the truth? And what was the fabrication meant to keep us silent? The story was no longer just mine or yours. It was a shared nightmare, a labyrinth with no exit, a truth that clawed at the edges of perception with teeth sharpened by decades of secrecy. And now, as you watch, as you listen, you too become part of the unfolding, pulled deeper into the web, the silence, the terrible beauty of the unknown. The ending isn't written yet, and every question you ask, every doubt you entertain, every glance you steal behind closed doors charges the air with electric possibility. Because in this shadowed place, beneath layers of memory, glitches, and unspoken horrors, the only certainty is that you were right all along. Something watches, something waits, and it's only just begun to reveal itself. In the dim glow of the control room, the air felt impossibly heavy, thick with the weight of years lost and secrets buried beneath layers of silence. It wasn't just the cold, recycled atmosphere of Titan's distant outpost pressing down. It was something deeper, something internal, as if the very fabric of my soul had stretched taut and was ready to snap. The mystery I had chased so relentlessly wasn't about what had happened to Marcus or Lila or the others who disappeared into whispers. It was about why. Why this slow unmaking of minds, this erosion of self, this fracturing of what it means to be human. And it wasn't an answer waiting outside me. It was inside, raw and unyielding, a reflection staring back from the shattered mirror of my own memory. The realization hit like a blow. The truth might save me, or it might destroy me. There was no middle ground, no safe harbor to hide from the implications of what lay beneath the surface of our shared nightmare. Because to know why this was happening, to understand the purpose behind Elysia, the manipulations, the erased lives, was to confront the deepest human fear of all, That identity is fragile, that memory is not a sanctuary but a battlefield, and that control is a currency we surrender without ever seeing the cost. I confessed it then, aloud though no one else was there. My vulnerability poured out like a river breaking through a dam. Maybe I wanted to be broken, I whispered, voice trembling, because broken feels like something real, something I can understand. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. We are creatures desperate for meaning, even if that meaning is found in pain. And perhaps this slow descent into madness was the only way to expose the raw truth beneath our facades. The fear, the loss, the yearning for connection in a universe that seems indifferent. The choice stretched before me like an abyss. To keep running into shadows, clinging to fractured memories that might be lies, or to dive into the darkness, to embrace the unknown truth and risk losing everything I thought I was. The moment wasn't about endings. It was a terrifying awakening, like surfacing from a dream you didn't know you were trapped in, blinking against the glare of a reality that refuses to be comforting or neat. I looked toward the dim horizon, outside the habitat's window, where Titan's orange haze merged with endless black, and felt the fragile pulse of hope and despair intertwining inside me. The story didn't end here. It was only beginning, and as the final silence settled, I whispered a line meant for you, for anyone who dares to listen beyond the veil. Some truths don't want to be found. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.